The floors were old, the tiles cracked in places, but they shone under the dim yellow lights of the high-end restaurant. An elderly janitor, Mr. Raymond, moved his mop slowly across the floor, his hands trembling slightly with age. He had been working here for over 2 decades, yet no one ever really saw him. He was just part of the background, a fixture, like the tables and chairs. Tonight, the restaurant was bustling. A group of wealthy businessmen sat at the VIP section, laughing loudly, their watches glinting under the chandelier. Among them was Ethan Monroe, a man in his mid-40s, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Raymond's yearly salary. Ethan had a habit of making sure everyone knew how important he was. As Raymond approached their table, carefully wiping the floor nearby, Ethan's laughter stopped. His eyes flickered with irritation as he watched the old man work. "Seriously," Ethan scoffed, nudging his chair back. "We're in the middle of a meal, and you're sloshing dirty water around like this is some back alley." The table chuckled, some shaking their heads at the janitor as if he had just committed an unforgivable crime. Raymond mumbled an apology and moved away, his frail frame stiff with embarrassment. That's when a voice spoke up, calm, steady, yet carrying an unmistakable weight. "Maybe he's just doing his job," Keanu Reeves said, looking directly at Ethan. The table fell silent. Ethan turned to see a man sitting alone at a corner booth, a simple black t-shirt and jeans making him look completely out of place in this high-end setting. His hair was slightly tousled, and he held a cup of coffee in one hand, stirring it slowly. Ethan smirked. "And who exactly are you to tell me anything?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He just took a sip of his coffee, his gaze never leaving Ethan's. Something about the way he sat there, so calm, so unaffected, sent a strange ripple through the air. Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Look, buddy, this isn't some Hollywood movie where the hero steps in to defend the helpless. This is real life, and in real life, some people are just, well, meant to mop floors." The group laughed again, but this time, it was nervous. Something about Keanu's presence made them uneasy. Raymond stood frozen, eyes lowered, gripping the mop handle tightly. He had heard things like this before. He was used to it. But this time, something felt different. And then, Keanu finally spoke again. "Funny," he said, his voice still quiet but sharp as a knife. "You assume he's the only one cleaning up messes tonight." Ethan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Keanu set his cup down and leaned forward slightly. "You'll see soon enough." A chill ran through the room, though no one quite knew why. Even Ethan, for all his arrogance, felt a strange sense of unease settle over him. Something was about to happen. Something he wasn't ready for. Ethan let out a short laugh, though it sounded forced. "All right, mystery man, you clearly enjoy the whole cryptic wisdom act, but let's be real, you're just another guy sitting alone in a restaurant, probably wishing you could afford to sit at this table." Keanu didn't react, he just smiled slightly, tilting his head, as if he had already heard this conversation 100 times before. Raymond, still gripping his mop, took a small step back, hoping to disappear into the background. But Keanu turned to him instead. "Sir," Keanu said gently, addressing the janitor with a level of respect that made Ethan raise an eyebrow. "How long have you worked here?" Raymond hesitated. No one ever asked him that. Not once in 20 years. About 22 years, I think," he said quietly. Keanu nodded, his expression unreadable. "And in all that time, how many people like him," he gestured at Ethan, "have you had to clean up after?" The question caught Ethan off guard. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tightening. "But Raymond," he let out a small, sad chuckle. "Too many to count." Keanu leaned back, folding his arms. "That's the problem, isn't it?" he mused. "People walk in, throw their weight around, make a mess of things, and expect someone else to clean it up." Ethan scoffed, shaking his head. "Okay, that's enough. Who the hell do you think you are, walking in here like some kind of philosopher?" "You don't know me," Keanu exhaled, his gaze steady. "I don't need to know you. I've seen 100 men just like you." Ethan's jaw clenched. The room felt heavier, the laughter from his friends dying down. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, sensing something unusual about this moment. Then, Keanu's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and smirked. "Ah, right on time." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Raymond and said something that made the old man freeze. You might want to take the rest of the night off, sir. Raymond blinked. What? Keanu just smiled. Trust me. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. Enough with the theatrics, man. If you've got something to say, just say it. Keanu finally met his eyes, his expression now dead serious. All right, he said. I own this restaurant. Silence. Ethan blinked, as if he hadn't heard him correctly. Then he burst out laughing. Oh, that's rich. You own this place. He turned to his friends, expecting them to laugh along, but they just looked uncertain. Keanu reached into his jacket, pulled out a sleek black card, and placed it on the table. The restaurant manager, who had been standing nearby, immediately rushed over. The moment he saw the card, his face went pale. Mr. Reeves, sir, I had no idea you were dining with us tonight. Ethan's smirk faltered. Wait, what? Keanu leaned forward. You said this wasn't a Hollywood movie, he murmured. But tonight, you're in for a plot twist. Ethan swallowed hard, and for the first time that night, he had nothing to say. Ethan's face twitched, his confidence cracking like thin ice. He glanced around the table, searching for support, but his friends looked just as stunned as he was. The manager stood frozen, hands clasped nervously, waiting for Keanu's next words. Keanu let the silence linger, letting it sink in. Then, he leaned back, speaking with the same calm authority. You were so quick to judge him, he nodded toward Raymond, but the truth is, you don't even know where you stand. Ethan scoffed, trying to regain control. Look, man, I don't know what kind of game this is, but... Keanu raised a hand, cutting him off. No games. He turned to the manager. Tell me, how do we handle customers who disrespect our staff? The manager swallowed hard. We don't tolerate it, sir. Keanu nodded. Good. He turned back to Ethan. Then I have a decision to make, don't I? Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. His expensive suit, his arrogant smirk, none of it mattered anymore. He wasn't the most powerful man in the room. Keanu exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers on the table. I could ask security to escort you out. Ethan's fingers twitched against his glass. Or, Keanu continued, I could do something better. A long pause. The tension thickened. Keanu glanced at Raymond. How much are they paying you here? Raymond hesitated, looking embarrassed. Not much, sir. Keanu turned back to the manager. Double his salary, effective immediately. The manager's eyes widened. Sir, triple it, actually. Keanu's voice was firm, and I want a formal apology. From the entire staff for every time he was ignored or mistreated. Raymond looked like he might faint. The other waiters exchanged glances, suddenly realizing they had never truly seen the janitor who worked beside them every day. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. You're just doing this to humiliate me. Keanu gave him a long, unreadable look. Then, he stood up. No, he said simply. I'm doing it because it's right. Ethan clenched his jaw, his fists tightening. But before he could say anything, Keanu leaned in slightly. And you? Keanu's voice dropped lower, colder. You should ask yourself why this bothers you so much. Ethan froze. Keanu held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned to Raymond. Sir, your shift is over. Go home. Enjoy your night. Raymond's eyes welled with tears, but all he could do was nod. Keanu took a final sip of his coffee, placed $100 bill on the table, and walked out. Ethan sat there, his face pale, his pride shattered. And for the first time in his life, he realized that money couldn't buy dignity. Next, Ethan sat frozen, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. His friends, once so eager to laugh at his jokes, now avoided his gaze. The weight of Keanu's words pressed down on him, heavier than anything he had ever felt before. The restaurant, once filled with his loud, confident voice, now felt unbearably quiet. Raymond, still stunned, wiped his hands on his old uniform, as if trying to ground himself in reality. I don't know what to say, he murmured. The manager straightened up. Sir, Mr. Reeves has made it clear, you deserve this. And on behalf of the restaurant, I truly apologize. His voice was sincere, and the other staff members nodded in agreement. Ethan clenched his jaw. This is ridiculous, he muttered, pushing back his chair abruptly. All this over some janitor. The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Because this time, no one laughed. One of his friends, a man who had always followed Ethan's lead, shook his head. Dude, just stop. Ethan turned, his eyes flashing. Stop, are you serious? But the friend just sighed. You don't get it, do you? He gestured around the restaurant. You keep acting like you're better than everyone, like money makes you untouchable. But tonight, you just got outclassed, outmatched, and outrespected by the guy you thought was beneath you. Ethan's face burned. I don't need a lecture. Maybe you do, his friend shot back. Because Keanu didn't embarrass you, you did that to yourself. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came out. His so-called friends stood up, leaving their drinks untouched. One by one, they walked away, until Ethan was the only one left at the table. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the center of attention. For the first time in his life, he was alone. Raymond, still holding his mop, watched the scene unfold. He had spent years being invisible, overlooked, dismissed. But tonight, for the first time, he felt seen. He took a deep breath, then did something he never thought he'd do. He walked over to Ethan. Ethan glanced up, expecting some smug comment, some words of revenge. But Raymond just looked at him for a long moment before shaking his head. I hope you figure it out, he said simply. Then, with the dignity Ethan had tried to take from him, he turned and walked away. Ethan sat there, staring at the table, the words echoing in his mind. And somewhere, deep inside, something cracked. Something that had been locked away for a long time. The realization that maybe, just maybe, he had been the janitor all along. Cleaning up the mess of his own arrogance. The end. That was a powerful story, deep, emotional, and filled with twists. It perfectly captured the themes of respect, humility, and self-realization.